Before we begin, please note, the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any affiliated organization. The content provided is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as professional advice. We encourage listeners to conduct their own research and consult with relevant professionals before making any business or career decisions. Enjoy the episode.
Good morning and welcome back to Coffee and Career Chats Startup Edition. I'm your host Adel Hameed, and whether you're a seasoned startup leader, an aspiring founder, or someone trying to carve their own path in this dynamic world, you're exactly where you need to be. Let's dive into today's topic and make these 30 to 40 minutes as valuable as possible. Today, we're exploring a topic that often gets mentioned but rarely fully understood: authenticity. More specifically, we're diving into the authenticity paradox. And we've got something extra special today. Joining us later in the episode is Dr. Jana Habson, a licensed psychologist and founder of MCM Conscious Mental Wellness Center based here in Dubai. Dr. Habson will help us unpack how leaders can navigate the balance between authenticity and professional growth. Trust me, you'll want to hear this. Now let's talk about authenticity for a moment. We hear it all the time, don't we? And in many ways, that's good advice. But here's the reality. It's a bit more complex, especially when you're growing, stepping into bigger roles, and navigating new challenges. Sometimes the version of yourself that feels most authentic can actually hold you back. And that's where the authenticity paradox comes in. This concept was explored in depth by Hermenia Ibarra, a leading researcher in leadership transition. Ibarra's work highlights that in order to grow as a leader, you often need to act in ways that don't feel like the real you, at least initially. It feels uncomfortable, maybe even inauthentic, but it's a necessary discomfort for growth. Let me share a story to bring this idea to life. There is Cynthia, a general manager in the healthcare industry. When she was promoted, the size of her team increased tenfold. She wanted to stay true to her leadership style, open and transparent. So she told her new team that she was feeling scared and overwhelmed. Sounds authentic, right? But it backfired. And instead of building trust with her team lost confidence in her. What they really needed in that moment wasn't vulnerability. It was direction and strength. This story, taken from Ibarra's research, perfectly illustrates the authenticity paradox. Cynthia was being her true self, but that version of her authenticity didn't work for the role she was in. Growth often requires us to stretch beyond what feels comfortable. And that's okay. It's how we evolve. Now let's look at another example. George, a leader in Malaysia, his leadership style, rooted in humility and consensus, worked well in his local context. But when his company was acquired by a Dutch multinational, where assertiveness and debate were the norms, George felt completely out of place. He thought that if he acted like them, he'd be betraying his values. But by sticking to his old ways, he struggled to succeed in the new environment. The lesson here, authenticity isn't about being one fixed version of yourself. It's about adapting to the situation while staying true to your core values. The ability to shift and grow, especially in a fast-paced startup environment, is crucial. Now, Amy Jensen-Su and Muriel Wilkins, in their article, also build on this idea. In their article titled "To Be Authentic, Look Beyond Yourself," they suggest that authenticity is not just about being true to yourself. It's about how you show up for others, basically your team. A good leader understands that authenticity also means meeting the needs of your team and responding to the demands of the moment, even if it feels a bit uncomfortable. Now let's bring this back to startups. Startups thrive on change, new challenges, new roles, constant adaptation. As a leader, you'll be pushed outside your comfort zone over and over again. There will be moments where you feel like you're faking it, or like you're acting in ways that don't feel authentically you. But remember, that's not inauthenticity, it's growth. So how do you balance the tension between staying authentic and growing into the leader your team and company need you to be? Here are some practical insights. First, shift your mindset. And instead of thinking, "I'm being fake," reframe it as, "I'm learning new ways to lead." Growth often feels uncomfortable, but that discomfort is where real transformation happens. Adapt to the situation. Ask yourself, what does my team need from me right now? Authenticity isn't about your comfort. It's about serving the moment. It's about serving the team. And finally, balance vulnerability with strength. Vulnerability is important, but in leadership, there will be moments where or when you need to project strength. Finding that balance is key. Whether you're a founder navigating growth, or a startup leader or an employee stepping into bigger responsibilities, remember, authenticity isn't about being stuck in one version of yourself. It's about growing, learning, adapting, while staying true to your core values. Now that wraps up our discussion on the authenticity paradox. But don't go anywhere, because up next we'll be joined by Dr. Jana Habson, who will share her expertise on how leaders can stay authentic while evolving into larger roles. Dr. Jana Habson is the founder of MCM Conscious Mental Wellness Center, based here in Dubai. With over 15 years of experience, Dr. Habson specializes in trauma, addiction, and couples counseling, and she brings a unique cultural perspective to her work. Fluent in Russian, English, and German, her practice resonates across cultures and organizations. Dr. Habson's mission is to break the stigma surrounding mental health and make it a cornerstone for personal and professional growth. In her work with both individuals and organizations, she helps create healthier environments that prioritize well-being. Today, she's here to talk about how leaders can balance authenticity with growth. Thank you, Dr. Jana, for accepting to attend this episode. As we discussed earlier, the main topic of this episode has been the authenticity, the paradox, or the authenticity paradox. And it's been always a challenge, sometimes if I'm authentic in a situation, it might backfire at me because I'm not censoring the kind of information that I need to share with my team. And I might give them too many details that creates instability, creates fear. And many people, from my experience as well, they're not ready to. Jack Nicholson, he had a quote in the movie, I forgot what's the movie, "You can't handle the truth." Some people can't handle the truth. So I wanted to take your take on this and your advice from your experience as an expert, as a subject matter expert as well, and an entrepreneur. So I'm sure that you passed through this, and some of your patients, or let's say people that you advise, executives that you advise, have gone through this as well. So yeah, so thank you. First, Welcome on board. Thank you so much. And maybe you could start by giving us an overview of why you got into this field as well. Why did you start your business? And then you can start talking about authenticity. What is it to you?
Well, thank you for having me. When I was preparing for this, I I was thinking, can I be me?
Of course. Yeah.
And that's a famous quote that Whitney Houston, I'm a huge music fan. She always used to say, "Can I be me?" And even right before we came on, I was looking at some videos on YouTube where she was keep talking about, "Can I be me? Can I be me?" before interviews, before concerts. And here I find myself also asking myself, how much can I be me? You know, like how much authenticity can you give yourself, and how much authenticity can people really handle?
Yeah.
So that topic for me is quite interesting. Briefly about me, I am 41. I'm ethnically from Kazakhstan and I grew up in Germany. I'm in the UAE since about 15 years, and I have started my entrepreneurial journey around 3 years ago.
Mm.
So, my first education is I studied actuarial science. So, I worked for companies such as Willis. Now they are called Willis Tower Watson, I believe. It's a international insurance broker. I used to work for Munich Re here in Dubai, and I used to work for the Daman Health Insurance in Abu Dhabi. And I always wanted to study psychology, like from as early I can remember. But when you come from a collectivistic background where the well-being of the society comes in the first place, or let's call it when you come from an ethnical background, you
Mm.
don't really have much of a choice. Either you study business, you study law, you study medicine, architecture, but not psychology because your parents are worried about can you earn any money with that.
Mm.
So I got my degree and then I threw it on my mother's table and I said, off I go to study psychology.
Mm.
So here I am. It was a long process to change your careers in your 30s. I was quite lucky to get support from my husband. And despite even pregnancies and children, I pushed through. I'm really lucky for my mentors back then. I remember I was pregnant with my second baby and I wanted to actually quit my university. And
Mm.
one of my mentors said, no, push through, you can do it. So I remember sitting in the classroom, like highly pregnant. And here I am. As I said, we have since 3 years, I opened my business.
Mm.
Speaking of authenticity, if I don't know if you can hear my children in the background.
No, the noise canceling is working.
Oh,
Yeah, I can't hear that. Yeah.
brush your teeth, get your bottles, and all of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, where was I? I
Yeah, you're
started my
talking
journey.
about continuing your studies despite all the challenges.
Yeah, so I did that. Got my license as a psychologist here in Dubai. Started with the first center here, and I think I was arrogant enough to say, I can, what you do, I can do better. So
Mm.
it just started really a small idea. I just remember being at the community pool here and I was
Mm.
thinking like, I remember a friend of mine had a clinic. Let me just
Mm.
give him a call and ask, what do I need? And all of a
Mm.
sudden people were so excited, like, yeah,
Mm.
that's a great idea. Let's do that. So
Mm.
I actually jumped in the cold water. I didn't know what am I going to what am I going to do?
Mm.
So yeah, again, really, really quite lucky to have the financial support, the mental support, the emotional support from friends and family members. So yeah, that's
Amazing.
that's about me.
Amazing. This brings us to the question or the main topic of today. As many of our audience are startup leaders, some of them are entrepreneurs, some of them are corporate experts, subject matter experts who are entering the startup world from the corporate world. Some of them are fresh grads. They want to know more about how to become successful in a startup environment. So authenticity is one of the leadership topics that where there are many articles on Harvard Business Review, books, courses in universities, and it's a very challenging topic to discuss because there is no one right answer. And especially as the first question I've got is, what is authenticity to you from your opinion, your view? And
So when I was preparing for the interview, I was really deciding, how does my contribution going to look like? Am
mm,
I going to sit here and, be the smart one and giving some advice,
mm,
or am I going to really embrace that authenticity?
mm,
And in order to embrace that authenticity, I realized that today I'm going to just speak all about myself.
mm,
Um, Perhaps out of narcissistic tendencies, but at the same time, who am I, to tell people what to do? I really
mm,
do believe people who are rooted in reality
mm,
um, have good enough portions of self-criticism.
mm,
They know exactly what they need to do.
yeah.
And I believe your podcast will also reach just anybody else, even
Mm,
besides the scope that you mentioned. And that's where I always say it's me, myself, and I.
mm,
If I would define authenticity, it's being genuine. I mean, I have
mm,
also here my little list that I'm going to look at: being genuine, being real, staying true to oneself. And
mm,
these are like, basic answers. But
mm,
I would like to into something that I call the me, myself, and I
mm,
exercise. So, have you ever, or the listeners that are listening to this
mm,
podcast, imagine, have you ever been at the gathering where a part of you actually does not want to be there? You actually rather be home and watch Netflix and sit in your pajamas and drink tea, right?
You know, I have a T-shirt, and this is what my wife made up. I don't know where she got it from. Phobie, which stands for the fear of being included, and she labeled someone who has phobia. And I printed a T-shirt that says "I have phobia." Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's yeah. So I can relate
So
to
you have,
the thing. Yeah.
yeah, you have that part, and we all have been at those gatherings, be it a aunt's birthday, or be it a social gathering, or be it a business meeting. Another part of you says, well, I actually want to really go and speak to that person because that person will be really good for my networking.
Mm-mm.
And then another part in you says, don't go there. They are going to reject you. And at the end, you're going to look like a loser, or you will not be able to put some thoughts out.
Mm-mm.
So we are all whole. We are like one, like, it
Mm-mm.
sounds silly, but at the same time, we're all fragmented, meaning we are a whole of many different parts. And just for the sake of simplicity, I call this exercise me, myself, and I. One part wants to go home, one part wants to go and socialize, another part says, don't go there, they will reject you.
Mm-mm.
So all these conflicts are going on in me, in one person, or anybody else who is experiencing the same. So that brings us to the adult, the critical voice, and the inner child. A lot of people on social media talking about inner child. How can you channel that? How can you bring out your most authentic self? Well, it is difficult because we have that inner child that is, and here I like to ask, give me your first most beautiful memory. And people usually, and I say it can be as small as possible, it
Mm-mm.
can be just a little fragment in time. And usually people go back to like the age of 3, 6, 7, 8, something in between that age. and they say, oh, my mom picked me up from school, or I got this beautiful bike, and they felt loved and a sense of belonging. And that is the true authentic self. When And authenticity incorporates all the four emotions that we have. I mean, you have kids, you probably watched the movie Inside Out. Now, the new movie has a little bit of more complex emotions. But if we go really down to the core ones, we have anger, fear, joy, and sadness.
Mm-hmm.
And all four are just messengers. Anger tells me you have crossed a boundary. Sadness tells me that I have lost something and I need to grieve. And it doesn't have to be a loss of a person, but it can be just maybe a lost dream or a lost opportunity. Joy, I mean, everybody knows what joy is.
Mm-hmm.
Fear is I am not able to control something. So we're not being taught this in school. Many people don't really know how to deal with that. People don't want to feel sad. People don't want to feel angry. They don't want to be fearful. So that is the most authentic self. When we would speak of authenticity and combining it with psychology, you would have then the inner child. The
Mm-hmm.
loving voice is somebody that speaks to you in a very compassionate way. So it's the guardian of the child.
Mm-hmm.
It always keeps the child in the main position, but supports it with logic. I mean, you would never leave your kid at home that is like 2 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But then also we have a critical voice, and the critical voice can be extension that we either get from our parents, we get from society, we get from teachers. It depends your birth order. So we have that critical voice. So just like right now, when I was thinking what I will
Mm-hmm.
talk about, I was thinking how much of authenticity can I present? Can I sit here with my PJs, or can I stop vaping here?
Mm-hmm.
Or can I just, and then comes this critical voice that sometimes can say, oh, you're not good enough,
Mm-hmm.
you're an imposter. But then comes also the gentle voice, the adult voice that says, well, Jana, look, you can vape after the session. Who knows who's going to listen maybe. When you start being an entrepreneur or dealing with many stakeholders, I believe people start having also a social responsibility role. So that is this loving adult voice that tells me, okay, put yourself nice together, put something decent on, you
Mm-hmm.
know, um, have your tea, don't swear.
Mm-hmm.
I love to swear, but don't swear, it's not nice. So
Mm-hmm.
this is where my authenticity is being cut,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a negotiation between my inner child
Mm-hmm.
and loving voice. Because if that critical voice would come out and
Mm-hmm.
say, whatever, you should show the
Mm-hmm.
host who is here the boss,
Mm-hmm.
and I would start vaping, this would be not really socially acceptable. This would be also a
Mm-hmm.
way of rebelling and trying to tell you you're not the boss.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I would be authentic, but from which place would it come?
Mm-hmm.
Would it come from a child supported by a loving voice, or child rebelling because that critical voices keep on lashing out on it, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So that's what I mean. Being genuine, being real and true to oneself. And by the way, if I talk too
Mm-hmm.
much, you can cut me off time.
Yeah, no, sure,
So
sure. It's I think what you're talking about right now. I've got a question in mind, but once you're done with your perspective, because this you just gave it a different spin, a fresh perspective, which I didn't think about earlier. So yeah, so please
yeah.
continue and yeah.
And most of the time, we live in the Middle East, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Middle East is a collectivistic society. Collectivistic versus individualistic. What does that mean? Collectivistic is the society is on the first place, and then it's you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you would like to know, like, what is Am I from a collectivistic background?
mm,
Have you ever heard, "Oh, look at your cousin, he's already a doctor." "Oh, look at your grandfather, who he was," you
mm,
know? And don't do that. What will your cousins and my sisters say? So the name, don't embarrass our name, our family
mm,
name. And in individualistic, how it characterizes is people really don't care.
mm,
It's North America, it's Europe, it's Australia, you know, it's where it's me, everything about me, and then my cousin or my sister. I mean, I grew up in Germany.
mm,
With 18, you gotta be out. And
mm,
if you live after 18 at home, I also came across cases
mm,
and real life experience where you have to contribute towards the rent or the mortgage. So you need to pay your contribution.
mm.
So this is an individualistic. And
Yeah.
if you come from an individualistic background, you have more freedom to be authentic because you
Yeah.
exercise it and it's being taught to you. But if you come
Mm,
more from a collectivistic background like you and me,
mm,
then and then you go and start like me starting a career that I don't even liked. And no surprise I got fired. And you don't even know who you are. Like in
mm,
order to be authentic, you got to know what
mm.
authenticity really means.
Interesting. You mentioned something there. You got fired. I'd like to hear the story behind that later, probably. But yeah, just on that topic, I think one thing that I touch upon as well, which is how the startup ecosystem and developing and emerging startup ecosystems or startup economies or even economies, the environment is totally different. The variables you've got as a startup leader, as a leader within a startup, within the startup world, is different. The business environment is different. Also, for example, here in Dubai, we've got people from different cultures coming, all of them working in one place. So you notice, I've noticed the tendencies for certain nationalities to fill certain types of companies depending on the owners. Yeah, so while you were talking about that, I started just recalling all of these facts. So what do you think about that? If I'm working in a company, should I be, again, being pragmatic, I'd hire the best skilled person and I'll be ignorant to the cultural fit. However, in reality, and I know we're a bit digressing from authenticity, but I believe they're both related because I'll do what is more comfortable for me. I'll bring people that I can manage that are from the same culture and they understand me. So that way, my definition of authenticity will be perceived in the way that I understand rather than bringing people from different cultures where authenticity could be misunderstood or could backfire as well. Do you think there is truth to what I'm saying? Or if you disagree, please.
Can you ask the question again?
Yeah, so let's say I'm a leader in a, let's say, in a company. It doesn't have to be a startup. I'm a leader in a company. And the reason I'm saying startups because we have to hire a lot as we grow. So do I hire the GCC? Do I hire people from the GCC? Do I hire more Indians because their culture is closer to the GCC? Do I hire Europeans? Europeans might have a different culture because they might, my sense of authenticity might not be perceived well by Europeans or Eastern Europeans or
Yeah,
Russians. So
yeah.
how do I manage that? How does, and again, I don't think there is a one absolute answer as we discussed earlier, but I'd like to get your take from what you discussed right now, the collective.
So from my point of view, I do believe that definitely we need to have a diversity.
Mm,
And I'm not just saying that for the check mark, and I'm not just saying that for to be politically correct.
mm,
It's just realistic what I believe.
mm,
Because when I started with my business, we were in total 8 psychologists.
mm,
Given the diversity here in the UAE, I had I wanted to make sure that every ethnical group is covered. So I remember just now So we got Arab speakers, we had me as German and Russian speaker, we had Ukrainian, from India, from Europe, and from the Philippines. And I remember interviewing the psychologist, and I have one psychologist with me. As I mentioned, she's from the Philippines. And then when we went on Zoom, and I can tell after 10 years in Dubai that she's from the Philippines.
Mm,
So we know how Filipinos are being treated in the Middle East as the servants.
mm,
Sometimes people are being really rude, you know. And apparently, I asked her, can we talk about the fact that you are Filipina? And
mm,
I think she really liked this question. And
mm,
I said, it's not meant to be accusational, it's not
mm,
meant to be judgmental. It's just a given fact and the reality
mm,
that certain nationalities will not likely
mm,
go with you and want you because they have this perception and the bias that you're not qualified.
mm,
And she's now, in 3 years into the business,
mm,
she's one of the top psychologists. And she's like, yeah, I really appreciate that you asking me. No, I don't have
mm,
any problems with prejudice, and so be it, I
mm,
will find a way. And I believe that was honest, that
mm,
was genuine, that was uncomfortable to ask her. But I
mm,
said, I'm totally behind you. I'm totally going to support and push you so we can change a bit of the narrative here
mm,
in in our business.
mm,
And so far it goes very
yeah.
well. So I enjoy this type of diversity because everybody brings their own flavor to it, you
Mm.
know?
This could have easily backfired, right?
Oh, definitely.
Mm,
Definitely. She could have said, you are racist and how dare you? But look, we are psychologists, and
mm,
in our world, we speak about the weirdest stuff.
mm,
For other people, it is, if non-psychologists would listen to us, they
mm,
would be saying, you guys are a bunch of weirdos.
mm,
But if we are looking at this, let's say we would be in the
mm,
US or Germany, and we're in the US, even in the CV, you cannot even put a photo of
mm,
yourself.
mm,
And I would say, oh, Adele, look, you're an Arab. And we are, for example, in the US. What do you think about that? And we would
mm,
be in a tech environment,
mm.
any other industry. You could easily sue me,
Yeah, yeah.
easily sue me. So I do believe that authenticity has its place. I
Mm,
mean, it, unfortunately, it needs to be selective.
mm,
And again, it's taking a risk. Yes, probably you could say, yeah, I am Arab. Yes,
mm,
we are here in the States, and I'm okay with that.
mm,
Also, how you frame it, I would say, look, you're Arab,
mm,
and I'm also not the whitest
mm,
person.
mm,
Um, how do we go about this? Do you know that we will have
mm,
bias? We will meet prejudice?
mm,
And you'll be like, yeah, I know. So it depends really if our authenticity really levels match,
mm.
But I'm totally pro diversity.
So let's look at authenticity. The opposite of authenticity is it adaptability? And how do we define adaptability against just being a narcissist liar that lies to get whatever they want? They engineer responses. So, how do you, from your perspective, and again, there is the beauty of today is that there is no one absolute right, all
No,
gray areas. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And we're just speaking about possibilities and opinions. Let's see, what did I write?
Mm.
Can you repeat the question? What
So,
is.
yeah. So, when if I want to compare authenticity with a definition or a word that's anti-authenticity, what would
Mm-mm.
it be? It would be adaptability. That means you're adapting to the situation. However, also adaptability could be mixed up with lying and engineering responses and yeah, being a narcissist. And this is a topic I believe we had discussion on before. So,
Yeah.
so what kind of advice you have or view you have on this? And again, for us as startup leaders as well, any advice would be helpful.
See, I really do believe that um, similar people attract each other.
Mm,
If you are yourself authentic and you will hire exactly the same people as you into your company. So if you look at my company, everyone is very much like me.
mm,
People pleaser, insecure, but we know how to deal with that. Because we as humans, we are all insecure and
mm,
we all have that imposter, we all are just neurotics
mm.
where our emotions go up and down. What is the should I ask ChatGPT? What is the what is is it a narcissist? Is it adaptability? I think if I would hire someone who would be a narcissist, they wouldn't last long.
Mm,
And again, as a psychologist, you do see people, you see their behaviors, you
mm,
see we're so sensitive. We call ourselves the wounded healers because
mm,
we have been through so much.
mm,
Where we are so sensitive, perhaps it's because that our environment back then
mm,
in the childhood was not very safe.
mm,
So we need to adapt what is going to come our way. So if a narcissist would apply, I think they will not last very long because we could sense them. But if you would have somebody who is non-authentic and a narcissist themselves, then they definitely would attract somebody like that because,
mm,
similarities attract each other.
mm,
So what kind of advice can I give? At the end of the day, I really do believe when people are egoistically, narcissistically in a company, in a startup,
mm,
they eventually gonna hit rock bottom.
mm,
Their arrogance is eventually is going to catch up with them
mm,
because we all are wired for goodness and we are all wired for a sense of belonging. So and a narcissist is actually, we all have narcissistic traits, by the way,
mm,
if you look into the field, into the beautiful approach that I follow,
mm,
it's called Gestalt therapy. They say we all have, it's like a dragon with three heads.
mm,
One is the narcissistic head, one is the neurotic head, and one is the schizoid head. What
mm,
does it? Narcissistic is like many CEOs, they have this psychopathy, they are not scared of any risk taking. They don't think very much, they just go and jump in the water. And the neurotic ones are the ones that are feeling too much, let's put
mm,
it that. And the schizoid is more the one that likes to isolate and be by itself or by
mm,
themselves. And it really depends which trait do we exercise. So for me, it was I am neurotic, and then I also exercise my schizoid phase where I would like to be by myself. But because I come from a collectivistic background, anger, assertiveness, narcissism,
mm,
this narcissistic trait, I was not able to exercise.
mm,
So in business, why do we go into business? Why do we want to be CEOs, founders, and all of
mm,
that? That narcissistic side is really, really calling its
mm,
purpose.
mm, mm,
And not everywhere can you really unleash it. So in business, they say it's nothing personal. So
mm,
you find in business and tech a lot of narcissistic traits, and I have them as well. Took
mm,
me a long time to accept them because they're unacceptable at the
mm.
beginning. But I don't know if we just drifted away from your question.
Actually, it's a you are touching on an important part. It's easy for us to judge ourselves. It's easy for us to confuse, lose sight, give in to our biases, not be mindful of them. Like hiring people like ourselves. If I'm a narcissist and I'm not aware and I'm not accepting that I'm a narcissist, and I go and hire people like me, that means this is a ticking bomb. So how can I mitigate that risk? How can I raise my awareness as well? So these are important topics.
I would like to say that maybe I'm biased, but therapy helps a lot.
Mm,
So I am myself for 10 years in therapy. Every day, not every day, every week religiously, I see my therapist.
mm,
And my therapist was actually the one that helped me through the beginning of, or even still now today. Because when you start a business, you don't really know who you are. You're doing it for the first time. We had a super grand opening, everything was nice. But then the next day you come in, and then what now? You had a nice grand opening, and then how do you get footfall into your
mm,
business?
mm,
So your insecurities come out, and
mm,
and and you don't know what is authenticity.
mm,
Am I an You completely suppress your narcissistic tendencies, where you need this, it's go time, it's
mm,
show time, you need to go, and you need to network, you need
mm,
to make sure that the business is up and running. And I do believe that therapy helps a
mm,
lot. At
mm,
least in my case,
mm,
therapist helped me a lot,
mm,
because I also hired people that are absolutely not like me,
mm,
and that were high in narcissism,
mm,
or being egoistic or opportunistic, and they fall off themselves very
mm,
fast, or just make it happen that they go away.
mm,
You and then in business they say there is no
mm.
rules, and sometimes there's no ethic.
Yeah, yeah.
With psychology, it is so difficult, because when I started the business, it's a humanistic, and at the same time you have two hats on, one as a psychologist, as the
Mm,
humanist, and then one as a business person, as the capitalist.
mm, mm,
Neither Soviet Union nor Germany is a capitalistic society, purely socialistic.
mm,
And he asked me to think like a capitalist.
mm,
You need to make hard decisions. And then and they are authentic. And the
mm,
authenticity comes then with a price. What are you willing to pay?
mm,
Because you have always two options.
mm,
One option, you keep that person in your organization that is totally against your values,
mm,
then you're betraying yourself and you're going to suffer.
mm,
Or you let that person go, and then you're going to deal with shame, fear, guilt, shame of I failed, maybe I am the reason,
mm,
fear, can I replace that person? And guilt is I did something wrong.
mm,
Or the worst thing is when people leave, then it's purely shame.
mm, mm,
And the difference between shame and guilt is shame, something is wrong with me, guilt is I have done something wrong. And in this entrepreneurial journey as a business leader, you go through that daily.
mm,
And my therapist has helped me a big deal to actually say, you are still okay, just be you, and supported me through the hardships when I was scared, I was ashamed, I was guilty. I mean, you yourself in your book, you mentioned that you started companies, you are in a startup. Like, how is it for you? How do you deal with
mm,
those emotions, like shame and guilt and fear?
mm. I keep distracting myself and I just keep going. I have no answer there, but I think I just keep telling myself I'm not alone. Everyone goes through this. I might feel that it's an abnormal thing, but and you need to have people that I have mentors. I'm lucky and blessed that to have mentors, to have peers and friends that I can talk to. But
Yeah.
I believe yeah, having a therapist as well looks at it from a scientific point of view could be or will be very useful. I need to try that. I'm actually guilty of not trying that. I've been advised to do that, but I just try to, you know, take the easiest path just to keep
Yeah.
moving.
I mean, this probably that topic is
Mm.
totally overused,
Yeah.
but there's stigma around it.
Yes, of course.
Why
Yeah.
would I get help? Why would I do that? I don't know, for me, it just helped. And
Yeah.
again, maybe my barrier for accepting help is much lower.
Mm.
Why do people go into business? Like, why do people do that? Why do they not go into teaching, being
Yeah.
a teacher, or being a marine biologist?
Mm.
Or, they are narcissistic traits,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's okay to have them
Yeah.
because that word narcissism is being thrown around so badly.
Yeah.
Poor narcissists,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and we all have the traits, and
Yeah.
it's okay to have them.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be here in the business
Yeah. Yeah.
or in the startups.
Actually, the direction that this discussion went into is very interesting. We didn't plan it. So, authenticity, not versus adaptability, authenticity versus narcissism. Yeah. So, maybe that's a question for another day, another episode. Dr. Jana, I really appreciate your time and thank you for being with us today. We'll definitely have you here again, in future episodes, maybe in the next season. And yeah, and thank you so much for the advice as well. If anyone from the audience would like to learn more about you and follow you, where can they follow you?
Well, we are all over the place. We are on LinkedIn, we are on Instagram, and the easiest way is to find us under MCM Dubai.
Okay.
So if you put in LinkedIn, MCM Dubai, it's a mental health center. It's a purely mental health center. We
Mm.
have 12 psychologists. We speak all languages. Everybody, if the people who are listening to it, they're like me, then you're definitely are going to be well taken care of by all the other 11 psychologists. So we speak Arabic, we speak Hindi, Russian, German, English, of course, Tagalog. Did I say Arabic? I
Yes,
don't
you
know.
do. Yeah.
Yeah, I did. So, and we work with children, we work with corporates. I became now a, not became, I work with adults and I work with
Yeah.
couples as a couples
Mm.
counselor. And one of my specialties lately became that polygamy, when a husband marries many wives.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So somehow, by the grace of God, became a specialist with that in that area. So we do also psychoeducational psychometric assessments that are accepted by the KHDA, so kids can get tested for their IQ and for autism. We also offer ABA therapy, applied behavior analysis, for neurodiverse children. So we cover a lot of avenues, let's say. Let's put it that way. But the most important thing is we really want to make a difference. We want to make sure. Sometimes people say to me, "Isn't this so depressing to work as a psychologist? You listen to all those bad stories. It's actually beautiful because you can see people's progress, how they get better.
Mm-mm.
And this
Yeah.
is the place in therapy where you can actually be really authentic
Yeah.
and learn authenticity. And I
Mm.
would only recommend that to everyone. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anyways, I'll share the details as well in the description of the episode as well. So if anyone wants to learn more, they'll
Sure.
definitely be visiting the site. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Dr. Jenna. Thank you. And really appreciate this is the fourth episode, and I really appreciate you taking the leap of faith, in the first season, because usually the first season we just keep experimenting.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you
It'll be
so much.
good.
Thank you.
They say stay real, stay authentic. Yeah.
That wraps up today's episode of Coffee and Career Chats. A big thank you to Dr. Jana Habson for joining us and sharing her wisdom. Authenticity is a journey, one that asks us to grow, adapt, and evolve while staying true to our values. I'll be sharing the links to the articles I referred to earlier and the link to Dr. Jenna's LinkedIn profile so that you can follow her and follow her work. If you found today's conversation valuable, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with friends and colleagues who could benefit from it and find it useful. Remember, leadership is about growth, and growth isn't always comfortable, but it's in that discomfort where you find your greatest strength. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep leading, keep growing, and stay true to who you are.